Hello, I'm Earl Lane, Executive Director of the AAAS Kavli Science Journalism Awards. Welcome to our virtual ceremony for the 2020 winners of these international awards, which are endowed by the Kavli Foundation. The awards honor distinguished reporting for a general audience by professional journalists. The program, administered by AAAS since 1945, celebrated its 75th anniversary in 2020. We usually gather for a reception and ceremony with newsroom registrants at the AAAS Annual Meeting. This year we are making the ceremony available to all registrants of our virtual 2021 Annual Meeting. Laura Helmuth, Editor-in-Chief of Scientific American and a longtime judge for the contest, will be our moderator. AAAS CEO Sudip Parikh is also here and will join Laura in introducing our winners. So I'll now turn it over to Laura.
All right, welcome, and thank you so much, everyone, for coming to this virtual celebration. It's been an amazing year. I want to thank everyone who's in the audience who's been involved in science communication in any way, whether you're a science journalist, public information officer, educator, scientist who does communication on the side, and anybody who's sharing real information on social media about this pandemic and fighting the other pandemic of misinformation this year. It's really important work, and we're delighted to be here together today to talk about some of the best journalism of the past year and the end of 2019. So hope you enjoy the show, and thanks for coming. And I'd like to introduce Sudip Parikh, the AAAS CEO and the executive publisher of the Science family of journals.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. 2020 has been an extraordinary year for all of us in the United States and around the world. And those extraordinary times have been a time when science has been integrated into everyone's conversations. And the problem with science and data being integrated into everyone's conversations is that scientists are not always the best people to tell the stories. Scientists are not always the best people to put things into context. Scientists are not always the best people to inform constituents and to inform policymakers. These have been extraordinary and challenging times for science reporters as well, with COVID-19 bringing subjects such as epidemiology and virology to the fore. They've had to master not only the science of the emerging disease, but also we've had to grapple, in many cases, with social and political upheaval as societies struggle to cope with COVID-19. Probing informed science journalism has never been more important. 6 of the winning entries covered the pandemic, with notable explanatory and investigative reporting. Another winning entry spotlighted the reality of climate change and the impact it is already having in the United States and globally. Beyond such urgent issues of the day, winning stories also told of efforts to understand nature at its most basic, its most awe-inspiring, from the complexity of the human immune system to the surprising behavior of slime molds. I heartily congratulate the diverse lineup of winners, including the first awards to reporters in Indonesia and Kenya. And let me thank the screeners and judges who helped make this contest an internationally recognized measure of excellence in science journalism, and they make it possible. Let me now introduce Eric Marshall, Director of Prizes and Special Programs at the Kavli Foundation.
Thank you, Sudip, and welcome everyone to our celebration today of science journalism. Sudip, we couldn't agree more on the importance of science journalism, and we too are thrilled by the reach of these awards. It's great to see reporters being honored from around the world, and as you noted, for the first time in some countries. The Kavli Foundation is proud to have endowed these awards. Our mission is to advance science for the benefit of humanity, and our founder, Fred Kavli, understood and appreciated that everything in our daily lives has been developed or improved through science, that science journalists play an essential role in helping the public understand and appreciate science and its value to society. Now, in these challenging times when science is being questioned and misinformation continues to run rampant, The rigor of science journalism and the commitment of science journalists for truth in reporting and storytelling is paramount. The stellar work of the winners you're about to meet are shining examples, and it's an honor to celebrate them today and every day. On behalf of the Kavli Foundation, thank you for joining us, and with a special appreciation to all science journalists for what you do every day, and congratulations to the award winners.
Thank you very much, Eric. And now we get to meet our winners. For excellence in reporting for a large outlet, the Silver Award goes to Sarah Kaplan of the Washington Post for the story The Storm Inside. She wrote about the heart-wrenching death of Keith Redding, who was an early COVID-19 victim and who became an important case study for doctors battling the virus. In addition to her vivid scientific descriptions of Redding's case, Kaplan also revealed the loss faced by Redding's loving wife, Dana, and Judge Sarah Zielinski, the managing editor at Science News for Students, applauded how Kaplan, quote, deftly married coronavirus science with a touching story of loss to create a moving tale that drove home to the reader just how serious and deadly the pandemic was becoming. And here is Sarah Kaplan.
During the frightening weeks at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, so many of us were isolated in our homes, unsure of what we were up against. There were few descriptions of the disease, few images of the suffering, and already Americans were resisting shutdowns, questioning how bad the coronavirus could really be. That's why I was so grateful to Dana Redding for sharing the story of her husband, Keith. Dana told me she wanted people to know how truly awful this disease was. If people understood that, maybe they would do what was necessary to protect one another. When I was writing this story in April, I couldn't have imagined the coronavirus would kill more than 1.8 million people by the end of the year. Behind each number is a story like Keith and Dana's. Each death is an unbelievable tragedy. And when you add them all together, well, I don't think there are words. But I hold on to the hope that Dana had when she allowed me to tell Keith's story. I hope it will inspire people to hold their own loved ones closer, make their community safer, and stop the spread of this disease.
For excellence in science reporting for a large outlet, the Gold Award goes to Lauren Weber, Laura Unger, Hannah Recht, and Anna Maria Berry-Jester of Kaiser Health News, and Michelle R. Smith of the Associated Press for an extensive investigation into decades of public health defunding that left state and local health departments ill-equipped to handle the coronavirus epidemic, when a bungled federal response left them to often fend for themselves. Judge Alexandra Witze, a freelance science journalist, called the story, quote, an exhaustive and eye-opening investigation into a state and local story that has not gotten as much coverage as the failed federal response to the pandemic, end quote. Here presenting joint remarks are Lauren Weber of Kaiser Health News and Michelle Smith of AP.
Thank you, AAAS and the Kavli Foundation for this honor. This all started when our fabulous AP and KHN editors, Allison Kojak and Keisha Weir, decided we should team up to investigate public health infrastructure during the pandemic. We made hundreds of phone calls, and what we found was worse than we could have imagined. Everyone knew that governmental public health had been neglected, but no one realized the extent to which it had been underfunded and was now under threat.
The five of us like to refer to each other as the dream team, but dozens of our colleagues at AP and KHN helped us bring the story to life. We also want to thank the researchers who gave us data. And most of all, we want to thank the public health workers who trusted us with their stories and gave us their time, even as they were fighting a pandemic and sometimes members of their own communities. Thank you so much for this award.
For excellence in science reporting for a small outlet, the Silver Award goes to Alex Kuffner of the Providence Journal. He wrote how coastal storms and rising sea levels are chipping away at the landmass of mainland Rhode Island and nearby Block Island, making the smallest of states even smaller. From his opening description of the perilous state of Block Island's landfill, located on a scenic bluff overlooking the sea, to his catalog of receding beaches along the coast of mainland Rhode Island, Kuffner explains not only what has been happening, but why coastal erosion poses a serious long-term threat. while coastal erosion, quote, is not the sexiest of topics, Judge Sarah Zielinski said, quote, Alex Kuffner brings this alive for his audience with his strong reporting and great storytelling. Now, here is Alex.
Thank you to the American Association for the Advancement of Science and the Kavli Foundation for this award. I'm deeply honored and appreciate so much the recognition for a story that I believe is of importance not just to Rhode Island, but to coastal areas and many other places that are subject to erosion. Waves and winds have always caused the contours of the shore to change, but the construction of waterfront homes, seawalls, and other hard structures have interfered with this natural process. As coastal areas have lost protected beaches and marshes, they are more vulnerable to rising seas. Storm surges are reaching higher and further inland than ever before. I've wanted to work on the story for many years, but I struggled to find a way into it. That changed when I learned about a landfill in one of the most scenic places on the East Coast that was literally falling into the sea. I'd like to thank the Providence Journal and our parent company, Gannett, for allowing me to take the time to report and write this story, which was part of a larger series of mine on threats to Rhode Island from the impacts of climate change. Like other topics in this series, which included risks to drinking water supplies and wastewater treatment plants, coastal erosion is a tough issue to relate to. I'm thankful that my employers gave me the freedom to try and write something compelling about these issues. And thank you again for this award.
For excellence in science reporting for a small outlet, the Gold Award goes to Kenya's Jeffrey Kamadi for his Science Africa story on the Tana River Basin under threat. Kamadi described in some detail the flora and fauna of Kenya's Tana River Basin, a biodiversity hotspot with a dozen protected areas. But looks might be deceiving, he noted, and went on to describe an ecological tragedy that is gradually unfolding. 5 dams on the Tana River have reduced the outflow of fresh water to the Indian Ocean, allowing salty seawater to flow increasingly farther up the river channel during high tide. A planned High Grand Falls Dam and other infrastructure projects will only make matters worse, Kamadi reported. Judge Alexandra Witze called Kamadi's story, quote, a deeply reported, sprawling, and evocative look at a threatened river ecosystem. Here's Jeffrey.
I'm really honored to be one of the award winners, to be honored with the AAAS Kavli Journalism Media Award for 2020. This has really encouraged me and many of my colleagues here in Kenya, especially given the fact that I'm the first Kenyan journalist to ever been honored with this media award. Thank you.
For excellence in science in-depth reporting, the Silver Award goes to a Washington Post team consisting of Chris Mooney, Stephen Muffson, Juliet Alperin, Salwan Georges, Simon Denyer, John Meiskens, and Carolyn Van Houten for their 2 degrees C Beyond the Limit series, which showed that climate change is real and it's already occurring globally. The Post team used more than a century of NOAA data to locate hotspots that already are near or have crossed the 2 degrees Celsius average temperature rise that has become a benchmark for extreme climate change. More than 1 in 10 people in the United States, which is about 34 million people, are living in rapidly heating regions, including New York City and Los Angeles, they reported. Judge Deborah Nelson, Associate Professor of Investigative Reporting at the University of Maryland, called the stories, quote, a potent mix of scientific analysis and shoe leather reporting that reveals the here and now harm from extreme global warming. Chris Mooney will accept on behalf of the team.
So on behalf of everybody at the Post who contributed to the 2 degrees Celsius project, I really want to thank the judges of the AAAS Kavli Science Journalism Awards. This was a really big project. It involved people across the newsroom, the climate team, the photo team, our foreign desk, graphics reporters, and many more. While it was a big, sprawling project, it came down to one actually pretty simple idea, which is that climate change is actually pretty unfair, very uneven. But if you look at the hot spots, the places where it is already the worst, the hottest, the most extreme, then you get a sign of what is coming for everybody else soon enough. So we're very honored that you found this project worthy of this high level of recognition. Thank you.
For in-depth science reporting, the Gold Award goes to Ed Yong of The Atlantic for stories on the COVID-19 pandemic. Scientists and public health specialists had long warned that such a global outbreak was inevitable, Yong wrote, but the United States failed to measure up when tested, partly because the White House had become what he called, quote, a ghost town of scientific expertise, end quote. In March, he wrote, rudderless, blindsided, lethargic, and uncoordinated, America has mishandled the COVID-19 crisis to a substantially worse degree than what every health expert I've spoken with had feared. Yang explained the basic biology of the virus, the unpredictability of the disease, and why the pandemic continues to be so befuddling. Robert Lee Holtz, science writer for the Wall Street Journal, called Yang's stories, quote, deeply knowledgeable, passionately written, prophetic, despairing, and scolding, quote, as well as, quote, hugely influential, end quote. Here's Ed.
Thank you so much for this amazing honor. This has been an absolutely pivotal year for science journalism, where our craft has never been so valued or so urgent. Much of the work I've done about COVID-19 has had this undercurrent that our failures this year are not just individual, but also societal. And I think the same must therefore apply to our successes. I'm proud of the journalism that I've done, but I could do it because I work at The Atlantic, because I have the best editors, because I was given the time and space and mandate to go as big as possible and to do the kind of journalism that matters. Not everyone has that privilege, and I'm very grateful for mine. And I would hope that the pandemic teaches everyone that if you give journalists the space to do their best work, they're more likely to be able to do it.
For excellence in magazine reporting, the Silver Award goes to Maya El Kapoor of High Country News for her story on the threatened yaqui catfish, the only catfish native to the western United States. A history of colonization and anthropogenic climate change has destroyed the animal's natural desert habitat. Quote, in a land of finite resources, Kapoor wrote, every choice, big or small, means choosing what kinds of habitat exist even far away from town, and that means choosing which species survive. Freelance journalist and judge Christy Ashwaubenon said Kapoor's, quote, gorgeous narrative of scientists working to save an endangered desert catfish masterfully captures so many urgent issues of our time, including the lingering effects of colonialism, indigenous rights, US-Mexico relations, Trump's border wall, and the vexing science of how to save a species from extinction. Here's Maya.
I'd like to thank AAAS, the Kavli Foundation, the team at High Country News, especially photographer Bear Guerra, and the Society of Environmental Journalism's Fund for Environmental Journalism. Congratulations also to the other awardees. I did not pitch this as a story about the US-Mexico border wall. I just wanted to write about a kind of weird fish and what efforts to save it could teach readers about borderlands history. But over 2020, the wall became an unavoidable focal point. Reporting the story, I spoke with and visited sources in the United States, Mexico, and the Pascua Yaqui Nation, and I'm thankful to all of them for their time. In the end, the story came together for the simple reason that although politics can create barriers, journalism can transcend them. Thank you.
The Gold Award for magazine reporting goes to Amy Maxman for a piece in Nature entitled Behind the Front Lines in the Ebola Wars. Maxman told how responders from the World Health Organization battled not only the deadly Ebola virus in a time of violent political unrest, but also deep-seated suspicion of outsiders by local residents in the Democratic Republic of Congo, who had suffered from more than a century of conflict, exploitation, and neglect from their government and the world at large. Despite efforts of about 700 WHO staff, almost all of them African, in cities and towns where Ebola was spreading, Maxman wrote that the death rate was soaring at 67% because the therapies, including the new Ebola vaccine, weren't reaching all in need. Quote, many residents just didn't accept that Ebola responders were there to help, end quote, she wrote. That greatly complicated efforts to trace contacts of those who had the disease, with fewer than half of those diagnosed with Ebola entered on contact tracing lists. Rami Zabar, a science editor at the BBC, said her story, quote, captures the futility and frustration, but allows you to believe and hope in the efforts of strikingly brave or just stubborn individuals. Here's Amy.
Thank you for this great honor. When I decided to fly to the Democratic Republic of the Congo last year to report this story, the Ebola outbreak felt remote and it felt irrelevant to most Americans. My editors at Nature and at the Pulsar Center took a chance by giving me the time, money, and support I needed to report this story. Now, a year later, during COVID, outbreaks don't feel remote. Everyday conversations use words like epidemic, transmission, and antibodies. And it's clear that many of the contextual factors that I wrote about, like misinformation, matter in the US as well. I'm truly honored for this award from AAAS and the Kavli Foundation, and I owe a great deal of thanks to my editors at Nature, especially Brendan Marr and Lauren Morello, and also to my photographer on this piece, John Wessels.
The Silver Award for Video Spot News or Feature Reporting goes to Joss Fong, Aaron Filkey, and Joey Sandediego of Vox for How COVID-19 Can Be More and Less Deadly Than We Knew. They took a close look at COVID-19 case fatality rates, weaving a narrative that included emotional human stories and underlying pandemic statistics. The video used white and blue-colored lights as a visual representation of fatality statistics, digging into how excess deaths are calculated. Larry Engel, associate professor at American University's School of Communications, said that the video, quote, makes essential statistics and probability, not necessarily the most visual of things, clear and interesting for a lay audience. Added Mayred Dundas of Trans 24, another judge, at a time when reporting on COVID-19 was overflowing with faceless statistics, this report managed to remind us what all these numbers mean at a personal level. Joss Fong will accept the award for the team.
We produced this piece during the peak of the COVID deaths here in New York City, and I was really grateful to have the tools of video at my disposal, the lighting, the motion, the sound, the voice and music, to be able to convey the tragedy of the situation that was unfolding. So thank you to AAAS and to the Kavli Foundation for including video in your awards program. And a huge thanks to all of the science journalists out there who kept us so informed this year.
The Gold Award for Video Spot News Feature Reporting goes to Jess Burns of Oregon Public Broadcasting for A Beautiful New Blue Makes Its Debut. Her engaging segment told how Mas Subramanian and his team at Oregon State University discovered a new shade of blue. Burns recounted the history of the new color's discovery and development. It was first created when a graduate student on Subramanian's team heated manganese oxide for an unrelated experiment. The surprising result was a vibrant new shade of blue that is extremely stable and uniquely suited for commercial use. I was blown away by the new blue, said freelance journalist and author Angela Saini. Such a clever little segment made better by a great interviewee, reminding us that local science reporting is sometimes the best. Tony Bartelme, projects reporter for the Post and Courier in Charleston, South Carolina, called the story, quote, a beautifully told piece about a color that will leave you thinking differently about blue and other colors. Here's Jess.
Thanks so much for this. It's a fabulous honor to get this award. Not something that I expected at all, knowing I'd be competing with reporters from national, international news outlets. Oregon Public Broadcasting has really provided amazing support for its science and environment team, and I'm so thankful to be part of this extremely talented group of people. In telling science stories, I've been encouraged to be creative and ambitious and experimental. It's such an incredible luxury. I just can't even say. I guess I want to thank Mas for opening up his lab to us so generously to shoot this blue story. Also want to thank Brandon Swanson, who shot the lab sequences so enthusiastically. I asked him to shoot like 30 close-ups of colored powder, and he kept going. Stephanie Gordon, who kept the camera rolling when I started throwing blue paint around in our makeshift studio. And my video editor, Dan Evans. It was our first time working together, and he was just great. Lastly, I just want to thank especially my editors, David Steves and Ed Yan. As editors and managers, they say yes, and that's why I'm here today. So thanks, y'all.
The Silver Award for Video In-Depth Reporting goes to Jacques Mitch and Laurent Mizrahi of Hauteville Productions for the French network Arte. Their documentary, The Blob, a genius without a brain, told how a creature out of a science fiction horror film has given its name to a baffling single-celled organism that has puzzled scientists around the world. Neither plant, animal, nor mushroom, the organism, called a slime mold, has no eyes, mouth, stomach, or legs. But the researchers interviewed by the French team say it can, in effect, see, smell, digest, and move around purposefully. It has neither a nervous system nor a brain, but it can solve problems and devise strategies as it moves. The Blob is being studied by biologists, physicists, and mathematicians who are developing a field of science in which, the filmmakers say, intelligence no longer implies the need for a brain. Author Angela Saini called the winning entry, quote, the kind of film that even those who think they have zero interest in science will find utterly fascinating. Equal parts funny and informative, I plan to watch it again and again. Here is Laurent Mizrahi to accept the award.
Thank you very much to AAAS and the Kavli Foundation for this magnificent award. It's an honor to see our work be appreciated worldwide. Thanks to Audrey Duchutour, the amazing researcher that brought us to the Blob. Thanks to Hauteville Productions, especially Karina Siamed and Vivien Meltz. And of course, thanks to Jacques Mitch, the director, who had the talent to turn a strange creator into a both beautiful and funny spectacle. The Blob, A Genius Without a Brain, is first and foremost a film about basic research that needs to be encouraged even more in these troubled times we live in. Lastly, I want to say that I showed the movie to my 6-year-old daughter, and now, of course, we have a blob as a pet, so I hope it will soon be the same for all of you watching.
The Gold Award for Video In-Depth Reporting goes to Bill Haney of Uncommon Productions for PBS Independent Lens. His film, Jim Allison Breakthrough, tells the story of an unconventional scientist and his path to a Nobel Prize. Shattered as a youth by the loss of his mother to cancer, Allison became a headstrong, long-haired, music-loving student fascinated with the immune system and its potential for combating cancer. He eventually led a research team exploring the mechanisms of T cells, the immune system's hunter-killer cells, and how to keep them in attack mode. The research helped usher in the use of immunotherapy to treat a variety of cancers. The film shows the obstacles Allison faced, including skepticism by peers and the high cost of long-term research. When you have a central character who is a harmonica-playing, cancer-fighting scientist, you probably have a good film going, said Larry Engel of American University. Add a Texas drawl and Willie Nelson, and you end up with a remarkable science film filmed with scientific twists and turns, told so well that I didn't want it to end. Here's Bill Haney.
What an honor it is to be chosen amongst so many gifted storytellers by the AAAS Kavli Award for my work and the work of my team on Jim Allison Breakthrough. We found making the movie with Jim an extraordinarily inspiring experience. Watching the courage and character and charisma and perspicacity he brought to building an amazing team to do something folks had considered to be, impossible, inventing the first ever really deep cure for cancer. And watching that journey was a real privilege for us, and getting a chance to share it with folks around the country and around the world has been an honor. Jim and his colleagues, I think, serve as an inspiration of what science can do when it's led with wisdom and grace and in service of patient needs the world over. We've obviously watched this through the COVID pandemic as we've seen extraordinary advances from science, and the AAAS's long-standing support of scientists the world over and scientific principles that undergird work like Jim's makes it a special privilege for me to be with you today. Thank you so much.
The Silver Award for Audio goes to Rob Stein, Joe Neal, and Jane Greenhalgh of NPR for 3 pieces on Victoria Gray, a patient with sickle cell disease who received the first use of a groundbreaking new CRISPR treatment for her genetic disorder. Stein followed the emotional narrative with grace and care, exploring both the science and the impact that the science has on human lives. The 3rd piece of the series followed up with Gray a year later, during the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter protests. Throughout the emotional narrative, Stein also managed to dive into the complicated science behind gene editing. The stories on a promising treatment for sickle cell disease, quote, stand out as an exceptionally moving exploration of cutting-edge science and its impact on people, said Rich Monastersky, Chief Features Editor for Nature in Washington, D.C. Rob Stein will accept the award.
NPR is just thrilled by this honor and incredibly grateful to Victoria Gray. She so generously allowed us into her life to chronicle her journey. Victoria is probably the most expressive person I've ever interviewed in more than 30 years I've been covering science and medicine. She was born with a terrible genetic disease, sickle cell disease. She volunteered to be the first person in the United States treated for a genetic disease with the revolutionary gene editing technique CRISPR. Victoria allowed us to document what could be the opening of a new era in medicine in the most personal way possible, through the eyes of one of the first people whose life has been changed by this exciting new technology. It's been an honor.
The Gold Award for Audio goes to Wendy Zuckerman, Rose Rimler, Meryl Horn, Michelle Dang, and Blythe Terrell of Science Versus from Gimlet Media for 3 podcasts on the novel coronavirus. Host Wendy Zuckerman and the Science Versus team dug into the science behind 3 coronavirus controversies. The first investigated the legitimacy of chloroquine as a coronavirus treatment. Zuckerman expertly explained the mechanisms that made this medication a consideration for coronavirus treatment and takes a deeper look at some of the studies that prompted the initial chloroquine hype. BBC Science correspondent Victoria Gill said the podcast's ability to get to grips so quickly with such a fast-moving, complicated issue as the prospective treatments for the coronavirus was impressive. The second episode looked at what it would take to build the coronavirus in a lab, debunking the idea that the virus had been created by Chinese scientists. In the third story, the team described an outbreak involving a Japanese cruise ship where more than 700 passengers tested positive for the virus, but only half experienced symptoms. Zuckerman discussed the possibility that there were many asymptomatic, quote, silent spreaders, end quote, involved and assessed whether available antibody testing was accurate enough to provide answers. Here's Wendy Zuckerman.
Thank you very much for this award. It means so much to us. Throughout the first few months of the pandemic, the whole team at Science Versus just worked incredibly hard to get the best scientific evidence to our listeners and to do it as fast as possible. And normally we would spend a couple of months researching an episode, but now we were trying to do it in a couple of days. And it felt like that wasn't fast enough because the myths and the misinformation about the coronavirus were just coming up like a 10-headed hydra. So thank you so much to everyone at Science Versus who just did an amazing job. Rose Rimler, Meryl Horn, Michelle Dang, Blythe Terrell, but also many others, including Sindhuja Srinivasan, Peter Leonard, and Caitlin Kenny. Thank you so much to the Kavli Foundation and to the AAAS and to all of our listeners. We will fact you next time.
The Silver Award for Children's Science News goes to Yunanto Utomo, Gregorius Jovinto, Bayu Adi Prakoso, Anggara Kusumatmaja, and Haman Haman of Compass.com in Jakarta, Indonesia, for using a comic book format to explore the biology of the novel coronavirus that triggered the global pandemic. In a 3-part series with 11 to 14-year-olds in mind, the team did not shy away from complexity and encouraged young readers to go on a journey of discovery. The series tells how coronaviruses were first identified, the changing understanding of their modes of action and impact on humans, and how science itself has been changing during the COVID-19 pandemic as researchers rely on new ways to get the latest research findings widely distributed. The series also presented an interactive game in which readers were asked to devise the best strategy for developing a COVID-19 vaccine, helping them understand the challenges developing countries face in the vaccine race, not only because of limited technology, but also because of inequities in vaccine access. Kathy Edwards, a producer of the BBC's popular crowd science program, called the Compass.com entry engaging and, quote, full of fascinating facts and stories of science and scientist stories presented in an original comic panel format. Here is team leader Yunanto Utomo.
Thank you for AAAS and Kavli Foundation who recognizing our works. It means a lot for us in Compass.com who are currently struggling financially, and it definitely will boost our motivation to innovate more. We try our best to invest on youth because we think it is very important for Indonesia since we have a lot of young populations. And in the world, we see youth leaders such as Greta Thunberg, who are very influential. We think that engage youth with journalism is very important to create future leaders who stand for science and able to produce science-based policy. Thank you once again.
The Gold Award for Children's Science News goes to Tracy Vonderbrink for a piece in Click magazine called Sniffing for Scat. She introduced her young readers to Iba, the conservation canine who helps scientists find floating scat from orcas, also called killer whales. By studying the scat, the researchers can learn a lot about the health and diet of the animals and the pregnancy status of the females without disturbing them. All kids are fascinated with poop, but that's not what makes this story so fantastic, said Judge Christine Delamore, senior editor on the Animals Desk at National Geographic. The approach of using Iba as a spokesdog for orca conservation is an ingenious way to both educate and entertain. She and her fellow judges said Vonderbrink's story was very accessible to the target age group of 3 to 6-year-olds and appealing even to 47-year-olds. Engagingly and concisely written with fun photographs, this story is a standout example of science journalism for children, Delamore said. Here's Tracy.
I'd like to thank Iba, the conservation canine, Dr. Deborah Giles, and the University of Washington Center for Conservation Biology for their generous help with the story. I'd also like to thank the editorial team at Click Magazine, Amy Tao, John Hanson, and Pat Murray, who always make me look fantastic. And of course, my deepest thanks to the AAAS and the Kavli Foundation for recognizing science writing for children. It is vital that we share science with kids. When we introduce it to young children and then foster scientific curiosity and learning as they grow, the end result is adults who embrace science and who cherish the natural world. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much everybody for attending this celebration, and congratulations to the winners, and thank you to everyone who enters this award contest. It's very competitive, and I can say as a judge, I think I speak for all the judges, that the submissions are excellent every year. They're really inspiring. You all are doing wonderful work, and it's very hard to choose the winners. There are many others in addition to these who are worthy of acclaim and who we wish everybody could also read. So I just want to encourage everybody to keep applying, keep trying, and we hope to see you all in person next time.
So I'd like to thank you all for joining us. We will be posting this award ceremony to our website, sjawards.AAAS.org. You can also go there for a news story about the winners that has links to their winning entries. Congratulations again to the winners, and I hope we can do this again in person next time.